Great. Okay, thank you. And the other thing is, if you have questions, please use the little Q&A button at the bottom right of your Zoom screen, and then please vote on the questions. It's much easier for me to answer questions, and I'll come to them at the end. So if you don't mind holding your questions till the end, please use the little Q&A button. Please write in your questions, and then please look at the questions and vote on them, because that allows, just give a little thumbs up, because that allows me to prioritize the questions as well. All right. So why should we care about 1.5C? So just quickly, what is this number 1.5C? So scientists generally agree that we should not warm the planet by an average of more than 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit, above pre-industrial temperatures. So before we started kind of burning fossil fuels to run all of our energy systems and our industries, our transport system, etc. That's kind of the pre-industrial temperature that they take as a kind of starting point. It's somewhere between, like, it's kind of an average between 1850 and 1900, and we are kind of warming the planet. Like, that's what we're all here for. We know this, and there's a general consensus that we should not exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius of average warming across the planet. Now, the important thing to know is that this is not some hard number. It's not some absolute line, but it is, you can think of it as a point on a continuum at which we begin to cross into multiple danger zones. So this is why we care so much about this number. This graph is actually taken from IPCC, so that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and they produce a lot of the sort of authoritative science on climate change. And some years ago, they had this special report on 1.5C. And what this graph shows is just, it sort of shows visually how the risks of all kinds of bad things happening get a lot worse as we cross 1.5C. So just a couple of things I'm going to sort of show you in this graph, and this talk again is getting recorded and will be available after, and everything, all the sources are also kind of here in the slide. So and you can look up this report as well, just 1.5C, IPCC 1.5C report. So you can see, for example, extreme weather events as we cross 1.5C, we are getting into this red zone, and they say red indicates severe and widespread impacts and risks. Here, what they've looked at is impacts and risks for selected natural, managed, and human systems. So you can see warm water corals, they're already in deep trouble. So, Arctic region, pretty deep trouble. Other things may not be as badly affected, like mangroves. So but you can just visually look at this chart and see that, well, it's generally a good idea to try to stay under 1.5C of average warming. And of course, one of the reasons that we are so worried about this, scientists are so worried about kind of crossing this threshold or even approaching this threshold, is because of global tipping points. So there's this, what is a tipping point? A tipping point is a threshold beyond which the changes become large, accelerating, and irreversible. Okay, a threshold beyond which changes become large, accelerating, and irreversible. So we kind of set up a positive feedback loop. And this is a new report on global tipping points, well, relatively new, just from last December, and it's from Exeter, all these scientists at Exeter College. So you can look it up if you're interested in this topic, Global Tipping Points, Exeter College, you can find this report. But there's also a really good resource on tipping points produced by Carbon Brief. It's a little bit dated, but it's very nice, kind of explains what these tipping points are. So just talking about a couple of these tipping points, just to sort of explain them a little bit more. Greenland ice sheet disintegration. So what happens when we start warming the planet? The ice starts melting. Now, Greenland is covered in ice, so it's white. White generally reflects heat, but as we melt the ice and expose the earth is dark, and that absorbs heat. So that sets up a positive feedback loop, because now you're absorbing more heat, and therefore you're melting more ice, and you're going to accelerate the disintegration of the Greenland ice sheet. Just sticking with the Arctic, permafrost loss kind of works similarly. So permafrost is just the frozen soil that's up there in the Arctic region, the frozen soil. This has a lot of methane and carbon dioxide trapped in that soil. As we warm the planet and it begins to thaw, we begin to emit this carbon dioxide, and especially the methane. Now, methane on a 100-year time frame is 20 times more potent than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas, even more potent on a shorter time frame. So that, of course, warms the planet further, melts the permafrost more. So that's another kind of tipping point that we don't want to exceed. There's lots of other examples. And again, you can look at this on your own time, but just kind of indicating one of the reasons why we really don't want to cross this threshold. Uh, Now, of course, uh, I we're talking about the fact that we're likely, or in fact, we are going to cross this threshold. And so I have this kind of ridiculous sounding statement here where it says why I killed 1.5 C. But I'll explain that what I mean by that. So I am one of the creators. Actually, I'm the main creator of this course we run at Terra called Climate Change Learning for Action. And some of you are students of that course, and I see you here, or graduates of the course. The Until December last year, all the materials in the course really sort of were written around an assumption that we could still manage to keep warming under 1.5 C. So that's kind of how we framed everything. It's how we wrote it all. The Paris Agreement, which is a big global agreement signed by most of the countries in the world, also kind of has this 1.5 C goal. And so that's kind of how we had framed the course. And by December 2023, it became pretty obvious to me that this was not going to happen, that we are definitely on track to cross 1.5 C. And that's what I'm going to talk about in this section. And so we had to go back and start to rewrite all of this course material. And so that's what I mean when I say I killed 1.5 C. But let me present some of this evidence to you, why I decided to make this change in the course, why we as a team decided. So first of all, what is going on with global average temperatures? Let's just take a look. So this graph is produced by Dr. Zeke Hausfather. He's like a really leading climate scientist. And let me just break this graph down for you. So all these colored lines. So what this graph, first of all, shows is monthly global temperature anomaly. So the anomaly just reflects the relative warming above pre-industrial levels, the relative warming above pre-industrial levels. So you can see it goes from like 0 up to 1.75 here. So now all these colored lines are kind of average for a whole decade by month. This black solid line is now 2024, and that dotted black line is last year, 2023. So you can see that we are in some pretty crazy territory in the last couple of years. Now, of course, last year we started an El Nino event. This is a kind of a natural cycle and kind of just a natural process that occurs mostly in the Southern Ocean and adds to warming. But all the scientists have looked into this and seen that this cannot fully explain, or it can't explain this huge jump that we're seeing. And so they've looked at other factors as well, and they still say this is something new happening in climate change itself, and it is very worrying, and they're trying to figure it out. So you can see that last year we were, pretty high, and this year, Dr. Zeke Hausfather says that we have a 95% chance, and in fact, this was last month, so it may be even higher now, 95% chance of crossing 1.5 C of warming this year. Now, it's very important to note that crossing 1.5 C in any one given year is not the same as the big 1.5 C, because that is a 20-year moving average. But the kind of worrying thing about that is that we won't know until we're 10 years into it whether we've crossed it, since it's a 20-year moving average. But this is not a good trend that we're on, like what we're seeing with these global average temperature anomalies right now. And right now, scientists say we're about 1.2, maybe 1.3 degrees Celsius on average, if you take that 20-year running average, above pre-industrial. So we're already getting pretty close. And if we see more years like this, we will cross this threshold very soon. Of course, the other worrying thing is what is going on with concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Now, remember, this is not emissions. This is not what we're putting up. This is the concentration in the atmosphere. Don't worry about the units. The main thing to take away from this graph is it keeps going up, okay? The main greenhouse gases of concern, we keep increasing the concentrations in the atmosphere people are especially worried about methane. We are actually accelerating concentrations and emissions of methane. But carbon dioxide, the main greenhouse gas of concern, methane, and then of course nitrous oxide is another greenhouse gas of concern as well. And the concentrations of all these gases in the atmosphere keeps going up. Uh, so what does that mean in terms of where we're headed? So this is a nice graph, and I promise you there's not going to be more graphs. I think this might be the last graph, so just bear with me on the graphs, and I'll try to break this down. I want to break this down for you because I think this is a really important graph. So this graph is produced by Climate Action Tracker. So what Climate Action Tracker does is they look at all of the policies and actions that all the countries around the world are taking, and they add them up and they use them to predict where we're headed in terms of emissions and expected temperature ranges by 2100. And so let's look at this graph in a little bit more detail. So on the x-axis is years, on the y-axis is global greenhouse gas emissions per year. This black line is historical. This tiny little dip here is COVID, but we've actually picked up since then. Now, there's only two things I want to call your attention to in this graph, just two things. First is this blue wedge. This blue wedge is actually where we're headed. So if you actually add up all the policies and actions, you can see we are nowhere near on track for 1.5 C. We are headed towards 2.5 to 2.9 degrees C of warming. If you add up all of the governmental and country actions and pledges. And the line we need to be on is this green line, okay, 1.5 C consistent line. And every year that we delay action, this line becomes steeper. So much harder to actually get on that trajectory. Every year that we delay action, this line becomes steeper. And so you can see that we've got a pretty big gap here to cover in terms of getting onto the right trajectory. So just hold on to this because I'm going to come back to it later in this talk. All right. So given that we are in this place with climate change, that we are basically on track to cross 1.5 C of warming, headed in kind of some pretty bad directions. What does this mean for how to think about solutions? How do we think about solutions? So broadly, people think of solutions in three big categories. Mitigation, which is broadly also called, mitigation, which is just
Hey, good morning,
reducing.
Ben. This is Ashley.
Oh, hi. Could
Hi,
folks just
I'm
stay
good.
on
I
mute?
received your call
Everyone,
early, your voicemail earlier talking about the lighting. Yeah, I was
folks,
wondering if you're able to reach out to
hello,
Amanda
someone needs
yet.
to go on mute. We can hear you on this. Yes, thank you. All
Okay,
right.
okay. I'm gonna talk. I wasn't able to contact her either. I'm gonna talk
Hello.
to her about this, and I believe we should be able to get back to you by today.
Oh God, how do we mute this person? Ian, are you here? Oh, all right. Okay. Well, sorry. Coming back. Um. Wait. Let me get back up.
Okay.
Uh, how do we shut down this person? I can't even see them. Does anyone know who's talking?
Yes, it's Ashley Tang, I think,
Oh,
here, and
all
she's
right.
not on mute.
Yeah, I'm
Ashley, could
trying
you
to
mute
find her so I
yourself?
can. I'm going to try to find her so I can mute her.
Yeah, we're texting her, calling her out here. Poor girl.
All right. All right. Yeah. All right. Let me just continue. Sorry, and this actually got a bit ahead of. Okay. So coming back. Sorry about that. Um, mitigation, removal, adaptation. Mitigation is just reducing emissions as fast as we can, getting to zero or what people call net zero
Right.
as fast as
Okay.
possible. Removal is actually sucking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere.
Yes.
Okay. Let me try to find her. I'm sorry. Just there's so many people on the screen. I'm having a hard time actually finding her.
Yeah. Totally understood. Like,
All right, got it. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. um, removal is actually sucking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Most obvious thing that does this is trees, but there's a small little technical thing to call out that if you actually protect existing forests, that's mitigation. If you add new forest, plant trees, that's removal. Small little technicality, but another way to, of course, remove carbon dioxide is through some of these new technologies like direct air capture, sucking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And adaptation is just learning to live with climate change. So, of course, this picture shows like a really, like how poor people are adapting, just putting their houses on stilts. But there's lots of things that folks are trying to do to adapt to climate change. Now, the very important message, which actually came up a bit early, but doesn't matter, is that there is no substitute for mitigation, okay? Removal is not a substitute for mitigation. We cannot remove our way out of this problem. We cannot adapt our way out of this problem. We need to do removal because we've delayed action for so long. We're going to have to do some removal. We obviously need to be adapting, but these are not substitutes. There is no substitute for mitigation. We have to decarbonize the whole economy and do it as fast as possible. There's one thing you take away from this talk. Please remember this: there is no substitute for mitigation. So given that we need to really focus on mitigation, how do we think about this? Like, how can we so I'm going to just focus on mitigation. I'm not going to talk here about removal and adaptation. So broadly, the way we talk about it at Terra is in terms of sectors and levers. And then, of course, justice is a cross-cutting thing. So if you think broadly about sectors, there's energy, there's food and agriculture, and then, of course, there's all of conservation. So energy, there's two sides to it. The kind of general consensus now is that we need to get to 100% renewable energy on the grid as fast as possible. And as we are cleaning up the sources of electricity, as we are moving to clean electricity, on the other side, we need to get everything off oil and gas and onto electricity. So we need to electrify our transport, electrify our industry as far as possible, and electrify all our buildings. So as we are converting our sources of electricity to renewables, we need to also be electrifying all these other parts of the kind of, the economy that consume a lot of energy. And then these two things actually complement each other. Of course, we also need to transform the food system. The number one and this also connects to protecting nature, because the number one driver of deforestation is clearing land for agriculture, mainly ranching. One of the biggest impacts you can have is to stop eating beef. You all probably know this, but this is a huge source of greenhouse gas emissions. And so we need to transform the food system. And of course, we need to conserve the forests that are already there and plant more forests. Now, these are sectors, and the way you might approach this is often through the skills you already have, and all of these levers are important. So if you're an engineer, you can work on these problems. You work in communications, education, policy, advocacy, economics, finance, law, you name it. Okay, all of these are cross-cutting levers, and they you can work on energy, and if you're an engineer, you can work on communications and focus on energy. You can work on law, focus on the food system. These levers all matter. So whatever role you currently have, whatever your skill set, they are all relevant. And this is not even the full subset here. And of course, justice is cross-cutting. I do this talk inside the Learning for Action course. I used to run it, now someone else runs it, a climate justice workshop. And I am convinced that if we do not center justice, we will undermine our climate actions. And so this is a really important thing that often doesn't get talked about or gets left out. But this is a very important cross-cutting theme and should be really front and center of all the work we're doing. So on the other side, it's also really important to beware of fake solutions and fake solution providers. Be very wary of offsets. You might have heard about them. I don't have time to get into the details now, but there's lots of problems with carbon offsets. When you get on if you book a flight on United or Alaska and they're offering you some offsets, basically it's not doing anything really. So beware of offsets. There's a lot of literature on this. For a while, everyone was very excited about blockchain. This is also kind of highly questionable solution area. Not really a real solution. Some nature-based solutions, especially connected to offsets, just be really careful. If you're dramatically deforesting in one area and then you kind of protect one tiny little patch on the edge, that's really not net positive. So there are all kinds of issues with some nature-based solutions. So you have to be quite careful and understand how it works. Carbon capture. Now, carbon capture is different from direct air capture. Direct air capture is sucking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Carbon capture is actually like capturing carbon emissions from the smokestack directly. Now, we may need this technology in certain applications, industry, for example. But what's happening right now is that the fossil fuel industry is using carbon capture as a way to legitimize the work they're doing and legitimize further extraction of oil and gas. So just beware of carbon capture. It's not it's also the technology itself is proving really hard to get right in a way. So look out for this if you see it. And generally, just be leery of all actors that are putting efforts into increasing emissions, even if they're also trying to reduce them. Okay, so this unfortunately is true of many actors. So most financial institutions right now invest in fossil fuel companies, even as they invest in renewables. All right. And remember, what does the atmosphere care about? The atmosphere only cares that we stop emitting. Okay. The atmosphere doesn't really care how much renewable energy we build. If that is not actually resulting in us reducing our fossil emissions, if we're adding renewables, but also adding fossil infrastructure, we are still adding to warming. Okay, every single molecule of CO2 that we put up there adds to warming. CO2 is a very long-lived gas, stays in the atmosphere for a long time. So every molecule adds to warming. So really what we need to do is stop emitting, just stop emitting entirely. Okay, so shifting gear, let's talk now about individual action. All right. So we've been focusing very much at the systems level. We've talked about the problem in terms of average temperatures. We've talked about the solutions in terms of sectors and levers. So what does this mean for you individually? What does this mean? Like, what can you do about this? And how much impact can you have as an individual? So this paper came out earlier this year, and it makes a really interesting claim. So what the researchers have done in this study is they interviewed 130,000 people across 125 countries. And they wanted to understand individuals' willingness to act on climate change. And they found some amazing things. They found that the vast majority of people, like 69% of the global population, expresses a willingness to contribute even 1% of their income. So that's really significant. Most people they want to take action. They endorse pro-climate social norms. They want more action. They're willing to do it. But individuals around the world systematically underestimate the willingness of their fellow citizens to act. And this perception gap, combined with individuals showing conditionally cooperative behavior, poses challenges to further climate action. So what does this mean? What this basically means is all of us are willing to take action, but we look around us and we see that our family is not doing anything, our friends are not doing anything, people in our workplace are not taking action, maybe our elected representatives are not taking action, and that makes us not take action as well. So we are very social beings, and it's kind of this lack of community that really has a huge impact. Like if you don't have a community around you that's sort of doing the work, you are much less likely to do the work. And this is why at Terra.do, we are really focus a lot on building community, building supportive community. And I'll talk about that a little bit later in this talk as well. So this said, that individuals are generally interested in taking action, but don't because they perceive others around them not taking action. I want to come back to this graph and talk about how it is that individuals have nevertheless affected change. So the one thing I didn't show you the last time I showed you this graph is that when I So I left India in 1997 and went to the UK to get this master's in environmental change and management. And that was the year of the Kyoto Protocol, the first big global agreement on climate change. And in that year, most scientists thought we were on this trajectory. Okay. So if you look at the old IPCC studies, scientific studies, back then we assumed we were on 4, even 5, this trajectory of warming, that we would hit 4, even 5 degrees, like catastrophic warming. And the thing is actually that we are bending the curve. Okay. We are bending the curve. And you might ask, well, how are we bending the curve? And you look here and you say, well, it's policies and action. But given the work I now do, I like to think about this differently. And I just think that it is lots of individuals like you, like me, like all of us, lots of individuals just doing the work, okay, no matter what your context. So people in government turning up and doing the work, people in companies turning up and doing the work, people in communities, people in schools, colleges, turning up and doing the work. And this is what is bending the curve. And of course, I call it courageous action because the system is stacked against us. It takes courage to do this work. It's hard work. You have to put yourself out there. We all have to be activists in one way or the other, even inside our organizations. Um, but this is just people turning up and doing the work, individuals everywhere. And of course, what we need is a lot more people. We need everybody just turning up to do this work. And this is what is going to make the difference. This is how we're going to bend this curve even further and get down to net zero emissions. And coming back to this 1.5 C of warming, what really matters is, so every fraction of a degree matters. So yes, we may cross 1.5 C, fine. But let's stay under 1.6 C. Let's stay under 1. Every fraction of a degree matters. So let's just get on and just do the work. So you may wonder, well, what does this mean for me as an individual? Like, how do I engage? So first of all, I want to say, and this might be a very strong statement, but I do believe it very strongly, that saying leave it to the experts, like, don't believe this, okay? We have been leaving it to the experts. The experts are doing as much as they can. They are doing as much as they can, and it is not enough. So we all have to really turn up and do the work now. It's not enough to leave it to the experts. And in fact, every expert will stand up and tell you the same thing. So do not think that someone else is going to solve the problem. We need everybody doing this work. Now, there's all kinds of ways in which individuals can engage. So you might have heard that you can change your consumer behavior, right? So you can change how the purchasing choices you make. If you have money, you can put solar on your roof. You can get an electric vehicle. If you can stop eating beef. You can just be more conscious as a consumer. Just buy less stuff. All kinds of consumer action. If you have money to invest, you can change your investment behavior. You can make sure that your investments are not going into fossil fuel infrastructure. You can shift how you invest your money. And then, of course, there is citizen behavior. Right here in the US, we have a big election coming up. This is very important for the climate. In fact, one could say important for the, possibly one of the most important elections for the whole world in terms of climate. And so we should be out there organizing. We should be out there supporting the right candidate. And by the way, that's Kamala Harris, okay, just in case anyone is not sure, in terms of, making sure that the government, the Biden administration passed this amazing climate law a couple of years ago, the Inflation Reduction Act, and making sure that that momentum continues, that we continue to see ambitious policies from the government. Starts with electing the right person. So we can engage as a citizen. And right now we have this incredible moment and opportunity in the US, and we should all be engaging. But the one thing that people don't talk about enough, and maybe also you might already know the answer here, but maybe the reason you're all turning up here is that really you can have a huge influence with your career. Think of the amount of time and how much skill and how much effort you put into your job every day, and add that time up over years, decades, and think of how much impact you can have with your career. Plus, how awesome would it be to just bring your career into alignment with your values? So The good news is there are a lot of opportunities, not always easy to find, not always easy to make this transition, but there's lots of evidence now that climate action is bottlenecked on talent. LinkedIn produces this green skills report this is from last year, and they find that the growth in demand for green skills is outpacing the increase in supply. BCG has found a skills gap. International Labor Organization says that we are underestimating the role of the skills development measures. And the IEA is the International Energy Agency, and they say that skilled labor shortages are really plaguing the clean energy sector and require attention. So we really just need more talent. We need more people coming into this space to do the work. In case you're wondering like how you can really get started, how do you think about picking a role or picking an organization? Suppose you're ready to make this transition, but you're still wondering, how do you find the right kind of organization? How do you pick a role that you know is going to have the right kind of impact? My colleague Seth Collins has written this brilliant guide. We actually ran a session in LA Climate Week as well. He ran a session, and the recording will be available as well. But you can also just find this on our website, this Climate Organization Impact Guide, and it kind of helps you uh, you know, like answer these questions. The other thing, of course, is I'm going to plug our course here, Climate Change Learning for Action. This is a 12-week climate fellowship for professionals looking to transition into climate work. We've been running this now for 4 years, and it's actually one of the biggest reasons why I feel optimistic about what the future might hold. And I know that sounds crazy given that I just said we're likely to cross 1.5 C, but I just see so many people turning up, amazing people, skilled people just turning up and committing to do the work. And I just see them turning. We run a cohort every 6 weeks, a new cohort we launch every 6 weeks, and every 6 weeks, like hundreds of people turn up, and they make the shift. So just 4 stories here of like the 4 kinds of shifts we've seen, and there are thousands more such stories. So Blair was at Meta. He took the course and he went back and he convinced them to give him this role. And now he's global head of net zero and sustainability at Meta. Amanda is actually in Los Angeles. She worked for a fossil fuel company. And then she switched over to the she took the course and switched over to the city of Los Angeles. And even though her title says Deputy Petroleum Administrator, a big part of her role is capping the oil wells. If you're in LA, you know there are a lot of oil wells. So that's part of her job now because the city itself is committed to shutting these down. Shraddha, very senior at Bain and Company in India, she took the course, and really what she wanted to do was build the capacity of Bain and Company to take on more climate work as a consultancy in India. So that's what she's been focused on. And Kaushik, we just had him give this amazing keynote to our students. He was in a nonprofit, he took the course, and now he's a founder of this other organization that helps farmers adopt sustainable farming practices and climate resilient farming practices. And he won this quite prestigious award as well. So folks are on different journeys and are doing amazing work. People are getting sustainability jobs at all kinds of companies and organizations. This is just maybe 10% of the list of organizations where folks have taken this course and they have gotten jobs. Okay, everything from UNEP to Nature Conservancy, US Department of Energy, Lego Group, Ernst & Young, you name it, people are getting jobs in sustainability. Now, again, the transitions can take time, they are hard, but folks are making these transitions. Just a little bit about how we think about like the kind of support that people need in order to make these transitions, because folks are on 4 different journeys, okay? In order to, if you are not in climate work, it's actually quite a big step to switch into it. So the way we have structured the course is that there's an intellectual journey. Obviously, you have to understand the problem. You have to kind of understand how to think about solutions and then get into solving mode. But there is an emotional journey, all right? Like, first of all, we're all anxious about climate change. And then if you're thinking about a career transition, this can make you even more anxious. And so there's an emotional journey that you're going on as well. There's a career journey, obviously. and often people just don't know where to start, how to have impact. And we have tried to structure this course so that by the end of it, you have a very focused, you know exactly where to focus and how to have impact. And then there's a very important community journey, because if you remember, I had shared that paper that talked about how important it was to, feel like others around you are also doing the work, how important it is to be supported. So we do a lot of work to try to build this supportive community, so that, say, alumni who have successfully achieved these transitions come back and help others achieve them as well. So very quickly, the classes, we cover all the topics. It's a pretty rigorous boot camp. We talk about solutions and levers. And then, of course, there's 4 lenses we try to apply: justice lens, systems lens, a global lens, because we get folks from all kinds of parts of the world, and practical applications. And people like this course a lot. They get a lot out of it. 65% are in climate roles after graduating. If this number doesn't seem high, remember, we are not a talent placement agency. We're not actually placing you in the company, but we're doing everything before that. Okay, so we're doing everything possible to help you. We're doing everything from a CV writing workshop and getting feedback on your CV to helping you identify the right organizations, network, all that stuff. A lot of our fellows come from developing countries. There might be even fewer jobs there. So yeah, this I would say. And also, we are not assessing for your skills upfront either. Everybody is welcome. So I'd say this is a pretty good number. And yeah, we've graduated 3,000 people now in 4 years, and folks get a lot on this course. So if you are new, here's a discount code. If you can just use your phone and scan the code, you can get a 20% discount. And then there's also scholarships available if you have some financial needs. So that's just about this course is one way in which you can make the switch if you're interested in making the switch. We also offer a lot of other courses. You can just go to our website. There's 2 that the deadlines are coming up for: carbon removal technologies, energy decarbonization pathways. So yeah, feel free to check these out. And the last thing I'll say, and then I'll go into the questions, is that this is so much more than a job, okay? When you align your values with your work, it is a profound personal experience. It will bring you joy. It will make you less anxious. I guarantee it'll make you less anxious. And yeah, it's the rest of your life. And you will be on this journey with others who are on the same wavelength as well. So think about it as more than just a job. And that's all. I'll stop now. Stop sharing, and yeah, go into the questions. See what folks have to. Let me just find the Q&A. Here we go. Okay, no questions. Wow, I have stunned you all into silence. Any questions? No questions? I can't see everybody on one screen, so thank you, Leanne, for the endorsement. Folks, feel free to use that Q&A, or I can now monitor the chat. So if you want to just put questions in the chat, feel free to just put it in the chat, or just you can raise your hand as well, and I can see you. Hopefully, if you raise your hand, and I can take questions. Yes, good question. Explain the other lines. Yes, sure. Let me get back to that. Wait 1 second.
That is a great graph. It does really indicate all the different expectations from so many different groups.
Yeah, let me just get back to it 1 second. Right. Yes. So the big difference between, so the thing is, we talked about this wedge, okay? This is policies and actions. The big difference is really between these pledges and targets. and policies and action. So what's happening is governments are making pledges, they're committing to certain things, but if you actually look at the policies that they are passing, they do not reflect that level of ambition. Their policies will not get them to that level of ambition. So there is a gap between what they are saying or the kind of the big goal and between what they are actually passing in their legislatures as policies um, and what they are actually doing. And that is what this gap reflects. Okay. So if we were actually on track with the pledges and targets, we would be in a much better place. Than where we are currently headed. So this is a much more realistic assessment, and you can look at the website and see how they are like also talking about these in more detail. But this is a much more realistic assessment of where we're headed. And this is what governments are saying on paper, but they are not reflecting in their actual actions right now. And then, of course, there's an optimistic version of this. So there's a little bit of a gap here as well. Like if you take the most optimistic scenarios, uh, um, like you get a little bit of a kind of a even better outcome. But this is optimistic on the pledges and targets and how you interpret them as well, because not all of them are easy to interpret. So most of the global South countries don't have like they're not making sort of commitments based on kind of these net zero. They're not making net zero commitments. They're doing it in other ways, and sometimes that's hard to interpret. And then, of course, 1.5C consistent is where we need to be. And so nobody's on track. And by the way, there's not a single country, I believe, that's on track. If you look at their website, they do it country by country. So no single country is 1.5C consistent, including the United States. Even with the IRA that we have passed, it does not put us, it takes us quite far if we actually achieve that level of ambition. And there's every sign that we are doing really well with the IRA. It is having a lot of impact in the US. There's tons of manufacturing going in right now, like new manufacturing, everything from solar panels to electric vehicles to extraction of lithium, like all kinds of things are happening, and literally factories are getting built. And interestingly, most of the IRA money is going into red states. So red states are actually seeing a huge benefit of this policy. They're not calling it climate. They're not talking about it as climate. They're just talking about it as jobs, manufacturing, which is great, whatever it takes. But this is the 1.5C consistent path. And because we have delayed action for so long, we're actually going to have to go we're going to have to do all this carbon removal. Okay. So the only way we can actually be on this track now is to do this carbon removal. So we have to get to zero and then kind of go below in terms of emissions. So I hope that answered the question. Let me see what else is here. Yes. So David, that's a good point. And it's also in the global agreements. So we're still talking about it as 1.5C, which I asked Zeke Housefather this question. I was like, well, how does this work? And he told me that he said, well, we're just getting more and more unrealistic on things like BECCS. So we keep adjusting, like we just make more and more like unrealistic. Every country is now making more and more unrealistic claims around how they're going to remove more carbon in the future. And that's kind of how they are bending themselves over backwards to still try and stay within this 1.5C of warming. And I think for companies, it's different. So companies can possibly very likely be 1.5C degree compliant. So maybe I think it's a really important point that you make. There's no reason why companies can't move fast and be 1.5C compliant. The one big argument I've seen recently that's quite interesting is actually an equity argument around these targets. And so there's a group of folks out of India who've been really criticizing all of these scenarios. And what they're saying is that like it's not fair that every country has to be 1.5 on this 1.5C pathway. And in fact, the way the global north countries are claiming to achieve these goals more and more is actually by just somehow magically getting more forests in global south countries, or like, yeah, by will dramatically expand like forests and the ECCS in global south countries. And there's a sort of like equity argument here around how we're thinking about this, like whether global north countries should even be allowed to, should actually be, on a more aggressive target, which feels even more unrealistic if you think about it. But you're totally right, David, that there's no reason that companies cannot, the business community can be on 1.5C target. This, it's sort of like a 7%, 8% rate of emissions reductions, and there's really no reason why they cannot be on this path. And by the way, David teaches a great course with us as well, greenhouse gas accounting course, and strategies for businesses. So thank you, David. And just want to, thank you for the good work you do as well. All right, and thank you for sharing that, Leanne. Oh yeah, so I would just go to that climate action tracker, Meena, and you'll see they've got all their countries, like all the countries there, and they've got like discussions about it, and they've kind of, so that's where I would go to look for that. Yes, structure of the classes. So the way, thank you for sharing, Ian. Yeah, already an answer there. So we have done our best to make it work for busy working people. So the way it works is that most of the classes or the content is async, and you go through that on your own. There are live sessions, but the only required live sessions are made to work for your availability. So you get to pick once a week this lab that you participate in. That's the most important session that we expect you to turn up for. So we want you to turn up for this live lab every week, but we make sure that we offer you all kinds of time slots for that, so you can pick the time slot that works for you. There are a few other live sessions as well. So there's a guest talk every week. There's a deep dive lab, which is actually going deeper into the topic of that week, and sometimes dealing with the more challenging, like technical aspects of the topic. Those are optional, and there's always, every single session is recorded, so you can watch the recording on your own time. And on Fridays, on Mondays, we tend to do more of so Mondays, we do the careers stuff, like stuff related to your career. Tuesdays, we do this live lab, which we want you to attend. Wednesdays, we do the guest talks. Thursdays, we do the deep dive labs. And Fridays, there's kind of an optional, like there's community events, there's co-working events on assignments, etc. So it's a global program, and we know most people are working. So we've really done our best to make it work around your schedule. The website for this course, second, let me just get to it. You could just go to Terra.do and you'll find it, but here's the fellowship. Do folks want me to share that QR code again? Sorry, this is not sharing. Why? I don't know why this is not going in. Oh, it's because I'm sharing to the waiting room, which is not the right thing. Do folks need that QR code again? You can just unmute and tell me, and I can share that slide.
I found the link as well. So here is.
Great. Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Wait,
Ian.
I'm doing it to the waiting room too. That's.
I know it's weird that came up as the first option.
Meeting group chat. There we go. So that code that I just posted, that URL, if you click that, that'll give you a 20% discount to the next climate change learning for action cohort. Discounts are all linked based. So if you click that link and then scroll down to the pricing section, then you'll see that it's been applied. There's no like place to type a code in or anything like that. So if you want it, it's in that link. we'll follow up with an email after as well, just in case you change your mind or if you want it or if you lose it. Yeah.
Thanks, Ian. I see another question from Amy. Are there any policy advisors working to get? Yes. So this is an interesting problem. So there's quite aggressive goals in various US states to get to. So basically in California, I can't remember the exact date. Maybe you guys know. Is it 2035? All new car sales have to be by that date, and I think it's 2035, maybe 2040. All new car sales have to be electric cars. Okay, so like you will not be allowed to get a new vehicle. Oh, thanks, David. A new vehicle that is not an electric vehicle by 2035. Now, the important thing to know is that exactly not, yeah. So that's a great question. I don't know enough about this, but it's a very good question because what often happens is that people get electric car as their second car. So actually, you still got the fossil fuel car. And if you look at the country like Norway, where they have like 70%, I think, of their sales or higher is EVs now. But if you actually look at kind of the profile of the cars out there, it's a much smaller percent because it's, sales is not representative of all the cars on the road. David, do you know if the IRA is doing much around? I know that they are doing a lot to incentivize the manufacturing of EVs and batteries and lithium, and they offer all kinds of subsidies, tax credits, etc. for that. But is anyone actually working to get fossil fuel vehicles off the road? It's a great question. Do folks know? Not tracking IRA. Does anyone
I think
know?
the IRA has a good amount to support battery charging and creating the infrastructure to support EVs, among other things.
Yes, thanks, Marcus. Yes. So the one thing I remember, okay, so long ago, I had this beautiful clunker car. It was an old Mercedes 300D from 1981. And back then we thought biofuels were a good thing. So we used to like get biodiesel from this co-op here in Berkeley, from like recycled vegetable oil. And this car, but this car like was diesel and it didn't actually meet like the kind of the new, air quality standards and rules. And so actually we had a small accident and we wanted to, that was the end of that car, and we were safe, but the car was not usable. But then it turned out that the government paid you money to take that car off the road. So because it was highly polluting, like there was some amount, $600 or something, to just turn your car in, your old clunker car. And we got this, we were grad students, so we were very happy for this payment. And we took it. Yeah, the car itself only cost like $1,200 to buy or something. It's a really old car. Yeah, cash for clunkers. There you go. Exactly.
That's
so
right,
we turned
yeah.
in our clunker. Yeah, that's exactly right. And got money for it. So the thing is, if states, I do wonder if there's going to be such policies soon to get old, especially the really old cars, because they are the most polluting. The other problem we have in this country is we like to buy very big cars. Okay, we really like to buy huge cars, SUVs basically. I lived in Hawaii for 10 years, and the number one selling vehicle by far was the Toyota Tacoma truck, like every single year. So people like to have trucks and big vehicles, and that's also a problem. Even if we could just get people to shift to smaller cars, that would make a giant difference. Yeah, there's lots of ways in which we can do this, have policies. And I think we do need such policies. Yeah, we're on time. So if folks need to drop, feel free to drop. I'm happy to stay for another few minutes if anyone has questions. But I know there's other stuff going on in this amazing week
I
of
have
events.
a big question. I have a big question for you.
Sure.
So we hosted an event. Ian was there at UCLA for LA Climate Week, which was wonderful. One of the things I like to talk about is when we talk about adaptation mitigation is regeneration and kind of the Paul Hawken approach. really fundamentally
Yes.
change the political economy and the relationship with the earth. How do you think
Yes.
about that as potential
Yes.
solutions? And I also say there's not a lot of jobs here right now. It's pretty theoretical. But how do you think
Yes.
about where regeneration fits into all of this?
So this is a great question. And actually, in the middle of the course, we have this, what I think is the most important class, and we call it mental models for solving climate change. Okay. And actually, in that class, we start with the fact that the traditional approach is very much this, like, the kind of the McKinsey abatement curve, like the sort of like cost versus like technology cost kind of sector technical mindset. And there's lots of things that are really missing from that. One of them obviously is justice, but the other is kind of this more sort of holistic framing. So actually, we talk about a few different ways to think about this, and one of them is Donella Meadows, like systems thinking. But then we really like to talk about the donut. So I don't know if you're familiar
Right.
with Kate Raworth and the
Yeah, I
donut
was just
economics.
talking
Yeah,
about it the other day.
yeah,
Yeah, the
yeah.
donut
So
economics.
how can you
Absolutely
be,
love it.
redistributive and regenerative by design? So in fact, we figured that we talk about that in two different places, in the mental models class, and the next class is called climate change and development. And we present that, and we talk in more detail about the Amsterdam experience and how they've been doing it.
Right.
And then we actually have an instructor who is one of the founders of Donut Vienna. And the cool thing is, I met Kate Raworth last week, and we're planning to do some more stuff together. Yeah, it was amazing. So that's kind of where we bring this stuff in. But I think you're making a really good point, because then later, when the fact is, in the end, people are going out into this world and looking for work. And like you said, so this, I think, is a space more for entrepreneurs, like people starting up things. And I think it's very important for like heads of organizations to think about this. But my wonder is that so I used to, long ago, actually, my very first job, even before that Selco job, was with this company called Solar Century. It was like the UK's first straight retail PV company. And I was like there in the first year, okay? Like we were three people trying to like sell solar panels in England in the 90s. And the guy who founded that company was ex-Greenpeace, scientific director of Greenpeace, and Jeremy Leggett. And he used to always say, he's like, well, there's only two futures for fossil fuel companies. He's like, either they shut down or they turn into us. Okay. Like I mean, in order to have a climate safe world. And I think about this a lot generally. I'm like, well, like either organizations should undergo these deep transformations, or we should find a way to shut them down. Like, and there's going to be a muddling through, like the world is imperfect. We are all imperfect. But I think the big challenge with Donut, and I've been wondering about this a lot, is like, I feel like there's not a good theory of change on like how we get from here to there. So there's a lot of like local examples and local stuff, but we're talking about huge global systems, the whole global financial system. We're talking about ways of doing national accounting, right? And that's part of the strength of the donut, is that this could be a new way to think about national accounting. And yes, in Europe, I think they're a little bit more open and trying different things. But at the end of the day, like our national accounting is still about GDP. The stock market is still about unlimited, endless growth. And so I think that's the challenge of the donut, is like, what is the theory of power? Like, what is the theory of change? And like, how are we getting from here to there in some of these bigger systems? And maybe that's our work to figure that out. Like, how are we getting there? So it's a great question. And I think, just kind of
I certainly think so. And it's so disheartening, even though Kamala Harris is clearly the obvious, if you care about the climate, the obvious choice. And yet the discussion of climate change and the idea of transitioning to a new form of political economy is just absent. There's so much emphasis on mitigation, which is absolutely essential, and nothing about healing the planet, and fundamentally sustainable solutions.
And maybe all solutions, I mean, everything starts somewhere and starts local. So like maybe that's how we have to think about it. We're like, well, if there are examples of people, of organizations doing this work, like how do we help them scale? How do we get the stories out? How do we inspire others? Because everything starts somewhere. And maybe the change trickle, the way to think about it is that the change trickles up with enough awareness, enough pressure. Of course, the problem is like, it's the urgency we feel, right? Because of climate change. Like, so that's the struggle here, where it feels like, well, we don't really have the luxury of time. Like, we're running out of time. And so that's the real challenge, is like, well,
100%. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that
Well,
question.
we could go for a long time on that, but
Yes.
stuff there. Yeah.
We could.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here. Yeah, hopefully I'll see some of you in the course, and I wish you all a good day and enjoy the rest of this event. Bye-bye.